our first time. So how should we start? Hello everybody, this is Amanda, and we are...
AmandaToast!
That's right, and we are here to provide you quality commentary and deconstruction of our favorite fantasy and sci-fi shows.
And we also toast.
That's right. So toast is something that people do to celebrate. So we're going to get together on a regular basis to toast the things we love about our favorite TV shows. So each episode of our podcast is going to feature a discussion about a show that we love and what we'd like to celebrate about it. Also maybe some of the things that didn't work out that great, but always in the context of what makes this show and this episode an amazing piece of art.
This season, we're focusing on the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, brought to you by Netflix.
Yeah, it's going to be really exciting. Our goal is to relive the magic of this gorgeous, thought-provoking series while we wait for a renewal of Season 2. So
please renew Season 2.
To kind of keep in mind about that. First of all, we're going to be talking about the Netflix series that was released in 2019 exclusively. We will be pointing a little bit back to the original 1982 film, just as a reference piece. But we will not be talking about the books that have been written since then and sort of fill in the world between when the film was originally made and the show when it was released, although they are major influences on the show. We haven't read them, so we're just going to focus on the show.
That's right, although that definitely is a possibility that we could read them later and maybe do a podcast about them.
Yeah, and if we have any viewers in the audience who have read them and want to provide commentary or feedback, please feel welcome to do so. This is our first podcast. We have never podcasted before, so we expect there's going to be lots of ironing out the kinks. Excited to hear from you and your feedback as we go.
There may be some awkward moments, but we'll get through it together. Yeah. Also, we should also announce this is a spoiler zone for everything Dark Crystal. So if you haven't seen the show and you don't want to be spoiled, please don't listen to this podcast. But come back later after you do watch it.
Yeah, or listen to this podcast anyway, because spoilers can sometimes just make the show even better.
Yeah, and we will have recorded versions of this show up on YouTube for sure, possibly other platforms. Should we talk about what the Dark Crystal is about?
Yeah, that's probably a good place to start.
Okay.
So yeah, episode 0 is about the world of the Dark Crystal. So just actually before we do that, our show is going to be broken down into 11 episodes. We're going to do one episode for each episode of the Dark Crystal, where we do a deep dive into that episode, what it's about, and what some of the key themes and ideas are that are expressed in that episode, how they contribute to the overall story and world of Thra, and then also some of the deeper meanings behind some of those stories. So in this episode today, we're just going to be talking about the world of the Dark Crystal, doing a bit of a recap of the series, things that we loved about the series, some of the major sets and characters that we can expect to find, and then the following episodes will be about specific pieces of the show itself on an episode-by-episode basis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so what are some of the kinds of things we're going to talk about in this podcast, Bea?
Oh, this, our content is actually pretty loaded. We've got, yeah, the show is loaded. It's so loaded with good stuff. So there's some really key themes like power and control, feminism and diversity, nature versus technology, matriarchy versus patriarchy, connectedness and harmony with nature. Yeah. The thing is, the show is a beautiful work of art with like these real beautiful practical effects and puppets, but it has a really strong theme of harmony that is a subtext to the entire show, and we're gonna get really deep on it.
Into those themes, yeah. Mm-hmm. So some of the tools that we're going to be using to do this deconstruction of the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance are going to be things like symbolism. So how are different symbols used throughout the show? What key pieces of dialogue tell us about the show and the messages and themes in the show? Plot outcomes. So what happens to characters and what are the outcomes of their actions, and what kind of message or overall theme are they meant to impart? We'll also be looking at things like foreshadowing, consequences of action, even color and tone, the role of magic, and other features in the story as methods and tools for deconstruction and analysis.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be drawing from lots of resources too, right?
Yeah. I have gotten a bit crazy with the mythical astronomy of the world of Thra. We're also going to be delving into a little bit of religion, political science, social science and philosophy, gender and diversity theory, and intersectional feminism.
Yeah, so there's lots to take out of this amazing, beautiful show. But yeah, so that's us. That's AmandaToast, and this is season 1 of our podcast, The Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance Deconstructed. We're so glad to have you all with us today, and we look forward to continuing this journey with you down as we go.
Yeah, so we will be paying a little bit of attention to the chat. So if we see any good comments in there, we're gonna say hello and call them out and talk about them for a bit, and then going to just basically mosey right on into our casual script that we've got here.
Yeah, it is a very casual script. All right. So let's kick it off by talking about the world of the Dark Crystal. So what is the story of Thra, would you say?
Well, it's a prequel to the 1982 film The Dark Crystal by Jim Henson Studios, which was reimagined by Jim Henson Company and Netflix 37 years later. So the original movie came out 37 years ago. So the series, debuting in the fall of 2019 by Netflix, dropped all 10 episodes of the series to our great delight. The entire story is acted out with creature puppets with no real human characters, and it takes place in another world, in another time, called Thra, which is a beautiful, looks like a lively little planet orbiting 3 stars, which is very important. Remember the 3 stars thing, because I've got a lot to say about that later.
This image that we're looking at right here is an example of Thra in its very early days.
Primordial, you could say.
Yeah, and one of the key features of Thra is this crystal of truth featured here in the center of the screenshot. How would you describe the crystal of truth?
Well, it's the life of all of Thra. All life comes from the crystal, which is how seems like that's how the life mechanism on this planet works.
So you could almost consider it as sort of the heart of the planet,
in
a way. Okay?
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, let's maybe just talk a little bit about sort of the history of Thra and how we get to where we are when the prequel starts.
Well, the Thra is, I want to say it's almost like a reimagining of ancient Earth, and we have a very motherly figure named Aughra, who is the embodiment of Thra.
That's right. So she talks to the planet, is connected to the planet itself. She's almost like a living deity.
That's right. She is Thra in a way. She's very closely connected with the crystal. And
you can speak to it and channel its energy. So the crystal it's the heart of the planet. It's the heart of Thra. It's the source of life. It's also sort of a barometer or a reflection of the health and well-being of the planet.
That's a good way of looking at it, yeah.
With the crystal to do that. So so trines are years in the world of the Dark Crystal, and about 2,000 trines ago in the Dark Crystal mythology, off-being species, an alien species, off-world species, landed on Thra, called the Urskex, and made their home here. And after which, things began to change on the planet dramatically. Forward on this, but the key thing I wanted to mention here is that the Urskex lived on the planet for about 1,000 years and interacted with Aughra, connected with Aughra, and they made a deal with Aughra, the deity of the planet. They said, if you give us access to the crystal to study it and understand the ways of Thra, we will build you an orrery that you can use to understand the ways of the universe. So that was the trade. So they built Aughra an orrery, and Aughra turned her eyes to the stars, and the Urskex began to study the crystal. And over the course of their time studying the crystal, they became into conflict with themselves and split into their best and worst halves. The Skeksis being sort of their everything that was chaotic and conflicting and violent inside of them. And I keep calling them the mystics. They're the Ergo?
The Uru.
The Eru, thank you. And the Eru, which represent their peacefulness, their harmonic side, and their love of the planet. So they became their two sort of polar beings split into two. And then the Skeksis took control of the crystal while their counterparts left.
Yes.
So they built a castle up around this crystal. And this became their home. And so they took the crystal and began to experiment on it and sort of cut it off from the planet entirely. So this is a great shot of the castle itself in this amazing, beautiful landscape. I love how vivid these landscapes are, don't you?
It's very lush right now. Lush and green.
Yeah, that's actually something to pay attention to, because in the 1982 movie, this landscape is very different, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so this, The Age of Resistance is a prequel to the original movie that came out in 82, and there's a scene in there where you see the castle and you see the land surrounding it, and it's blighted. It's completely dead.
Totally.
Yeah,
so this is very, very early still in the reign of the Skeksis and their control over Thra. But they've got this crystal trapped in this castle. Here's another shot of the castle just zoomed in. Some of the immediate thoughts that I have when I look at this castle is that it's very chaotic. It's got sort of a bone-like, death-like symbolism to it.
Yeah, and it even has almost a Skeksi portrait on it, sculpted out there.
You can actually see it here really well.
Yeah, it reminds me of Gaudi, which is a European architect who built the cathedral that looks really crazy.
Oh, which cathedral is that?
I can't remember.
A cathedral that looks really crazy? Okay,
Yeah.
I'll have to dig it up later. But yeah,
In Europe.
Got this interesting sort of bone bridge looking thing here. Like, it's very sort of skeletal.
Yeah.
Voting. I don't know why nobody picked up on that.
Yeah. They live in an evil castle. How come no one thinks they're evil?
They live in the death castle.
Yeah. They're fine. They're so generous. Look at all they've given us. So the Skeksis, when they got control of the crystal, they immediately started draining the life force from the crystal into themselves to prolong their lives, and it created an imbalance in the binary life force of the planet of Thra, which is darkness and light. And what it's doing, because they're draining the life force, the light, there's another force called the darkening, which we'll talk about more in depth, that is starting to become more powerful, and it's affecting the creatures of Thra in a bad way.
Yeah, so essentially the Skeksis have been around for 2,000 years, approximately, by the time the Age of Resistance starts. They have been extending their lifespans by draining energy from the planet, which has caused the crystal to become corrupt. So in the first slide that we showed you, that crystal was a clear, translucent material, and now it has become this dark purple sort of amethyst radiance inside of it, representing the growing of the darkening inside of Thra as the Skeksis continue to tamper with the balance of that life force.
Wonderful. So we have a comment from Mike DeSimian in our chat. He says, the castle I'm thinking of, the cathedral in Europe, is Gaudi's La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, Spain.
Perfect. There we go.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mike.
Great. But yeah, so we've got this corruption happening throughout the land, and this is where the story of the Dark Crystal really starts to take place in the Age of Resistance. So before we take a look at the characters here, I just want to take a couple of minutes to talk about Ogra and her orrery. So this is just an example of the tools that Ogra was using to explore the universe. And what else can we say about Ogra?
Oh, so much. Ogra is a Odin One-Eye figure, but she's also a Gandalf the Grey figure, and she's also Mother Earth. So in our story, she's like a beautiful amalgamation between a picture of Gandalf and Mother Earth combined, and that is Ogra. She's the guide for our heroes that sets them on their journey. She's connected with Thra, so she can feel a creature's pain, she can feel a creature's life force. she's also eager to explore new knowledge. So when the Skeksis built her this orrery, it's basically an observatory, but it allowed her to fix her third eye. So we're gonna, I really got to talk about characters that have three eyes, and they met the magical third eye. Definitely go into depth this season about that. She fixes her third eye upon the stars, and it's basically like, here's the internet, Agra. Now go explore the internet while we bugger off with your precious crystal and do what we want with it. That's basically what they did.
So she went down the dark hole of Reddit for a really long time.
Yeah.
How did it take her to surface?
Well, when she comes to her, her podling servant says 80 or 90 trine. But again, I feel like, I think I heard a reference later in the show that someone comments that she's been gone for hundreds of years or hundreds of trine. So it's...
maybe that was the last time that she had woken up and kind of checked in, but that she's actually been part of the world of Thra for much longer.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
So here she is here now, waking up and entering the world of Thrall once again. So we'll be talking a lot more about Ogre in the different episodes here. Just wanted to point out again the significance of those 3 suns. 3 is going to be a really important number that we explore in a few different ways throughout this.
Yeah, and triangles. Picture that gif of the crazy guy looking at the chart with all the red dots connected to it. That's how we're going to talk about triangles later.
Yes. So, yeah, we talk about the role of mysticism, shamanism as magic, and about this powerful symbol right here. What is this symbol?
Oh, well, this symbol, so it's called the Oriole, and it's specific to the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. It's basically three triquetras, which are a really typical Celtic knot you see in ancient Celtic artwork, but also modern Celtic knotwork. You'll see it in there too. And it's 2 triquetras combined, a larger one and a smaller one, with and then they have a triangle framing them. So the symbol is really important for the Gelflings to remember. It's about the Great Conjunction. It's about unity and harmony, and everything's connected and it's all together.
Yeah, so we're going to revisit where that symbol appears and what its significance is in several different points of the show.
Yeah, so I feel like we should take one step back and talk about the Great Conjunction. In the 1982 film, The Great Conjunction was when all the suns aligned in the sky to create a single beam of light that made a very powerful, that fractaled off of the dark crystal and made a very powerful beam of light that combined the Skeksis and the Urus back together. But it's also how they originally were fractal apart. And I'm using the word fractal for a reason. Sorry, fractured. Fractal.
Fractal is a good choice.
Yeah, they were fractured apart by this beam of light. And the Great Conjunction only happens once every 1,000 trine. But it's in the mythology of Thra, it's very important to the events that pass in the season and in the movie.
And to this idea of prophecy that is tied to the movement of the stars.
That's right, yeah.
Yes, that's right. So we'll be returning to that. My favorite part about this screenshot, as beautiful as this is that you have, so this scene takes place in the library of Harar, which is one of the Gelfling cities, the capital. And one of our characters, Brea, is down here in the bottom corner, just kind of freaking out. That's excellent. As this symbol bursts out of her book. So I think that's really everything about sort of the backstory about Thra and the world of the Dark Crystal. We've got this planet that's been around for a long time, existing in perfect harmony. We've got this deity spirit, Mother Ogra, who is the living goddess of the planet. We've got the crystal of truth that is connected to the core of the planet, reflects its health and well-being, and is the source of life and energy in the planet. And then we've got the arrival of these alien beings who have since been ruling the planet in Ogra's absence. And it's important to note that the Skeksis, because they've been around for so long, and they've been draining life from this crystal for so long, they have been around longer than any single Gelfling on the planet. So they spend a lot of time trying to protect their image as immortal figures and godlike beings, and are able to continue that mythology because they've been around for so long. So when we open our story, we start with the creatures that are considered closest to Thrall, which are the Gelfling, and the creatures who are going to suffer under the oppression and weight of Skeksis' rule in this universe.
Mm-hmm.
So they live under a mythos that the Skeksis are their benevolent lords and masters, and that they are eternal, essentially, that they are godlike figures, as if they were similar to Ogra herself, although they don't actually know the truth of that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's sort of where we start off. Overall, though, B, what would you say the story of the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance is about?
Oh, well, it's a story of resisting a fascist, capitalistic, neoliberal empire, really.
And the fall of
And the fall of it. Well, in this story specifically, the thing is, we've seen the 1982 movie, and we know that Gelfling civilization fell, but by the end of Age of Resistance, there's a lot of hope. There's so much hope that they can beat the Skeksis back and basically win their rebellion and their resistance. So I would say that this season is about, you could go on for like 3 or 4 more seasons with this story and all of this lore and all of this mythology and background and all these characters, and it's a great setup for the beginning of the resistance.
Okay, so with that in mind, why don't we move into some character spotlights? We're going to start with our main cast of characters, the peoples of Thra, and the Gelfling in particular. Before I go into these, though, do you want to just take a quick minute, B, and explain the Gelfling for our viewers?
Yeah. So the Gelfling seem to be Thra's dominant, intelligent species. They have culture, they have language, they're like little people. They're kind of like a mix between an elf, a fairy, and a halfling. So picture like a little hobbit, but mixed with an elf and a fairy. The males resemble small people with large eyes. They're very closely connected to nature. Their culture is very rich and their artwork is very rich and beautiful. The females have wings.
So there is actually quite a bit of sexual dimorphism between the two
Yeah.
in the world of the Dark Crystal, which is something we'll also be talking about as well in later episodes. But yeah, so they're the primary sentient species, although not the only sentient species on the world of Thra.
Mm-hmm. They are also organized into matriarchal societies. So there are 7 tribes of Gelfling, and they're all matriarchal. They all are ruled by a Madra, which probably means mother in one of their, like in an older language.
So one of the things that I find the most amazing about this series, or that I really enjoyed about this series, in addition to having 10 amazing hours of content, in addition to the 1982 film, is that there are so many amazing voice actors driving these characters and professional puppeteers driving these characters, and it really comes out into the richness of the story.
Yeah, a lot of some of my favorites from Game of Thrones are in this show. We have Natalie Emmanuel's the voice of Deet. Lena Headey's the voice of Madra Farah.
So that's Cersei Lannister there.
Yeah. And they basically the show really blew my mind when they when it first came out and it was announced, and then they started announcing the casting. I was like, we're getting 10 episodes, all puppets, all set in the Dark Crystal, and the cast looks stellar and amazing. Like, how, like, Netflix is giving me this? How? This is amazing.
It's pretty amazing. How would you describe Deet? Deet is, in my mind, she's sort of the heart of the group.
Yeah, and she is the heart. That's exactly how I would also describe her. The Groton are the gentlest and the clan of Gelfling that lives the most harmonious with nature. I have a feeling they're all vegans. I also have a feeling they might only eat like fruit. Like there's a type of vegan where you only eat fruit, that which you're not killing the plant to eat it. So I'm suspecting, I don't know for sure, but I just suspect that that's how they live.
They are a cave-dwelling clan, so they live entirely below ground, which is why she's got these big, gorgeous glossy eyes, and darker greenish skin, I imagine, from all the algae and lichen that they eat.
Yeah.
Or possibly fruit.
Yeah. Deet is she's yeah. I was thinking about her upbringing. She has almost three parents. She has two dads and a grandma. And I feel like it was just a really supportive house to grow up in because she's so friendly. She trusts everyone uh, instantly, and she wants to be friends with everyone. You can tell she's yeah. You can tell she's. I just feel like she's come from a very safe place.
Yeah, definitely, and it reflects in the respect and care she treats other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anything else you want to say about Deep before we hop on to our next spotlight?
She's one of my favorite characters.
Oh, is she your favorite?
One of my favorites.
I was wondering, out of the three, is she your favorite out of the three?
Oh,
Can you pick?
I can't pick.
Yeah,
Okay, I can't pick.
I can pick. I love Brea.
Me too. Yeah.
I do love them all, though. So, Brea hails from one of the northern clans, the Vapra,
Mm-hmm.
and is the daughter to the Almudra, who is the leader of all of the Gelfling clans. So I would describe her as sort of the intellectual of the group. She's the one who is sort of brimming with questions and curiosity.
Yeah.
She's sort of a little bit fearless that way. She's not afraid to get into trouble in pursuit of answers, and that sort of fearlessness and pursuit of the truth is what compels her to break out of the mold that society has set for her.
Mm-hmm.
Which sort of starts this cascade of events that ultimately lead to the unearthing of the Skeksis' evil plan.
Yeah. Yeah, she is fixed like a bulldog on the truth. And if she thinks something is a lie, she wants to know the truth real bad.
Yeah.
And
and there's a certain sort of honesty and integrity about that I really quite admire about Brea.
mm-hmm.
Like there's no malice or animosity in that quest.
Yeah, because there are some serious.
It comes from a really moral place and a desire to do good.
Yeah, and as we'll see, there are some really serious consequences to her uncovering the truth and looking for it.
That's right. All right, and our third Gelfling of the Focus feature here, character spotlight, is Rian. Rian is actually hails from Stone in the Wood. They are the clan closest to the Skeksis. He works in the Skeksis castle underneath the what's the word I'm looking for? His dad is his boss.
Oh yeah. Ordon is the head of the guard at the castle.
That's right.
So he's got and he's got some big boots to fill.
Really big boots to fill, and he's trying his best to fill them, but seems to not quite do it quite right. There's something about him that doesn't allow him to just sort of blindly follow orders the way that they've been set out. He's got a certain playfulness to him and a really strong sense of moral rightness.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like he may have, growing up with his dad and Rian, his mother is never mentioned, so I feel like he may have grown up in a single parent house. But I do think that he yearns for his father's attention and appreciation and respect. And it may be something he feels that he doesn't have yet.
That's true. He does, especially earlier in the season, he does have a lot of attention-seeking types of behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
You know, pulling pranks on the pod people in the castle, and trying to catch the spitter to prove himself and to prove his worth.
Mm-hmm.
But as we see, it is these exact traits that end up serving Rian really, really well when he does get into trouble and allows him to escape the wrath of the Skeksis and eventually bring his story to the Gelfling people to become their champion.
Yeah. I think he may be my favorite puppet, of the show.
Yeah, he's got beautiful eyes, doesn't he?
Yeah, and there are some scenes where he looks so real. like the lighting is low or something, but he just looks incredibly real. And kudos to his puppeteer, Neil Sternberg.
Yeah, it's amazing puppetry. So yeah, these are slightly stretched photos of the peoples on Thra. So we've got our 7 Gelfling clans, Ogra and Hup, representative of our pod people. So just going from left to right, maybe we can just take a little bit to talk about these different clans again.
Sure. The Stone in the Wood clan, they're the fiercest warriors of Thra. They have, it sounds like they have some war in their history, just from things that other characters have said and referencing battles long past. Which is why the Castle Guard has a lot of stone in the wood Gelflings.
Yeah, that's right. And so this is the Mudrafara of the Stone in the Wood people, voiced by Lena Headey, who played Cersei Lannister in Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
And then just next to her here, we have an example of our Drenchen.
Is that, it's hard for me to see the photo, is that Gershon?
Yeah, it's Gershon.
Okay, there's Gershon. Okay, so Gershon is Rion's best friend, and he's of the Drenchen clan, which are swamp dwelling clan.
Yes, tell me again some of those interesting facts that you know about swamp dwelling.
So I was on the Dark Crystal wiki, and the Drenchen clan, the Drenchen Gelfling, have gills. They can breathe underwater, and the wings of the females are like fish fins, so they can swim better underwater with their wings.
So they're literal swamp people.
Yeah, we don't see that in the show, but that's just a fun fact to know about them. They're also, because they live in a swamp, and because, I guess we'll talk about it later about how there's a lot of prejudice amongst the Gelfling between the clans, and maybe even a history of war between them, and mistrust.
Yes, you do see those prejudices come out in certain places. Yeah, we'll definitely be drawing attention to those when they come up.
Mm-hmm.
Just next, after the Drenchen here, we've got the Grot clan, and this is actually Deed's family. These are her 2 dads and her little brother, and her grandmother, who is the Mudra of the clan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so major characteristics: they've got big eyes that are photosensitive, larger ears, and they're quite pale looking. They're strong and proud and gentle, and they eat. I just looked it up. They eat glow moss.
Is that all they eat?
That's what it sounds like.
That's the only thing they eat.
That would explain the skin coloring, though, totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so next we have the Sifa clan. We don't see much of the Sifa clan in the first season, do we?
Actually, we do. We see them more than other clans. Well, not like the top 3, but we do see them more than like the
Sprite.
The Sprighton, yeah, or the Deucin. So the Sifa are, well, it's in their name. They are a seafaring clan of Gelfling. They're traders. They trade in goods, probably all across Thra. They're also other members, like Gelfling members of other clans, are known to jump on a Sifa ship and go on an adventure, and come back with a history. There's a couple of episodes where the Sifa are mentioned and a character mentions a history with them.
Yeah.
It's
They are known to be adventurous, and
yeah.
one of the prominent roles that they play in the Age of Resistance is that because of their knowledge of folklore and adventure, they know quite a lot about symbols.
Yes. Yeah.
So just next to the Sifa here, we have our Spritons.
Mm-hmm.
We see Spritons working often with Stone in the Wood folks, and with Rion specifically.
Yeah, they're traditionally a farming people. But not much is known to them. There's only one main Spriton character, and that's Kylan, yeah. But he's the only one, and we don't really explore the Spriton culture very much in the show.
Yeah, we know that they're peaceful and that they ultimately want peace, but they're sort of people of the earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we've got the Deucin here, which I think are one of the prettiest puppets.
Mm-hmm. They paint their faces.
They've got this striking blue and gold skin coloration that I think is meant to help them camouflage in the desert.
I think they paint it.
Oh, you think it's painted?
I think so. I'm not sure how much of it is painted though, but yeah, the puppets are absolutely beautiful. The Deucin, the other, they're mistrusted by the Skeksis and by other Gelfling clans, because they say that they're obsessed with death, but the Deucin just, they know that death is a natural cycle of life and of a natural cycle of Thra. Death always comes after life and it's just natural for it to occur, so they're not afraid of it. But I think because they accept it and welcome it, that's why the Skeksis absolutely mistrust them, because the Skeksis never want to die. And they don't want people to talk about death around them. So that's why they're forbidden to be castle guards.
That would make sense, right? Because they make them face the reality of their false immortality.
Yeah.
Right? People can't be questioning that.
Yeah. So the Deucin live in a desert. They're a desert-dwelling clan. And
That's right.
yeah, we meet a few characters later in the season. They're cool looking.
That's right. And so the last one here we've got is the Bafreux Plan. So this is where Brea comes from. These are her two sisters here, and not shown in this image is her mother, who's actually voiced by Helena Bodum Carter.
Yeah, the Vaprin clan, they live at the top of the mountain. They're called the most cultured clan, and so far as we've seen, they're the only clan that has a library. So the Almandra, she presides in rule over all the clans. And we learned later that the clans used to have a democratic way of picking the Almandra, but the Skeksis declared that the Vapra would always be the Almodra. So the sisters, Celadon, Tavra, and Brea, have grown up knowing that one of them, the oldest one, would be Almodra. And that's what the current Almodra is training them for rule.
That's right. So they've sort of, in this way, this is a really great example. The Skeksis have disrupted and interrupted the harmonic balances in Thrall.
Yeah.
So instead of having this sort of shared egalitarian tribalism between the clans, despite different conflict that may have been in place or not, they've put one clan above the others and immediately started a hierarchy.
Yeah.
A lot of prejudices come out of those beliefs about that hierarchy.
That's right, and it's led to some clans even being cast right out of the choosing of the Almodra. The Groton never seem to show up for the choosing.
Well, I mean, the Groton have almost been forgotten entirely by the other Gelfling, haven't they?
Yeah.
So we'll be exploring more of those themes in the show in future episodes. And then lastly, we've got little Hup here. Hup is a member of the Pod People. The Pod People sort of fit in the world of...
I want to say they're like third-class citizens, unfortunately. They're used as servants by the Gelfling and the Skeksis. We see them also serving Algra. She has a caretaker who is a podling.
That's right. They seem to have... we see them very differently in the 1982 movie. There's a very different sort of relationship between the Gelfling and the Podling at that point in time. Resistance, they are sort of treated like almost like a semi-intelligent species. So they've got their own language and they've got their own culture, but at least as far as the Vapra, who often care for them as a form of punishment for their youth, C is that they are unhygienic and sort of barbaric and uncivilized, and they've got this sort of revelrous party spirit. They don't mind being in the dirt and things that these Gelfling would sort of associate with uncleanliness or being uneducated. But we actually find out, especially through Deet's relationship with Hup, that the opinions of the Pod People are quite misaligned.
Yes.
What they are actually about.
The Podlings are quite smart, and they are a sophisticated race. Their ways are seen as a little bit crazy because they love to party.
They do love to party. In fact, we might be Pod People at heart.
Yeah.
What are you drinking right now, Bea?
Homebrew wine.
I made a Caribbean sour. It is coconut rum, and lime juice and maple syrup because
Oh,
Canadian.
I am drinking a Pinot Grigio that my husband and I made ourselves. And are we going to save our toast for the end of the podcast, or could we toast Hup? Because I think Hup needs a toast.
You know what? We can give Hup a toast now
Okay.
because he absolutely deserves a toast. The
Mhm.
podling
Yes.
who is smaller than everyone and braver.
Yes. The bravest podling.
Hup,
Here's to you, Hup.
bravest podling.
Oh, I should clink.
Can you do that?
Did you hear
There we go.
it?
Yep, heard it. Okay, so Ogra we've already talked about, so we're going to keep going. I do also want to talk a little bit about these friendly fellows.
Oh yeah. So we should tell our listeners something about ourselves here for a minute. You and I go way back.
We do.
And I know
Time when dinosaurs ruled the earth.
I know you're an arachnophobe. So tell me, what do you think of the Aratham?
So, I think that they did a really good job with making them scary
Yeah.
unfairly.
Yeah.
So, of course, because they're spiders, and I think a lot of people have associations with spiders being scary and poisonous and bad, and they're going to crawl in your mouth when you go to sleep, and all these other things that we think about spiders, we immediately assume that this is some kind of intrinsically evil species. They're associated with Skeksis. We see one escape the castle, and it wasn't until I completed the series that I realized it wasn't let out by the Skeksis to escape from the Skeksis to go and wreak terror on the society. It was running away.
Yeah.
It was a slave.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that about the show because it really kind of shakes you out of your prejudices about certain things. And I think that's one of the key themes and ideas behind this show that's explored in a few different ways, right? Because by the time you get to the end of the series, a lot happens, right? The Gelfling get pulled into the hive mind. They get sort of absorbed into the sort of Borg-like collective, and they all have one voice and one thought, and these are things that we would typically consider to be really, really scary. But to this race of intelligent spider-like beings, this is entirely what they are, and they don't seem to be inherently malicious either. So they end up partnering with the Gelfling over their shared homeland. Indeed, again, the heart of the show makes an alliance with them by saying that, as far as I'm concerned, this is everybody's home.
Yes.
We all live here, so you're just as rotten as we are.
Yes.
So she's able to see them beyond what they look like.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that is a really powerful message. And as a viewer, I think it was really important that they were set up this way so that we could be shown how powerful that message is.
Yeah, exactly. Something that I really love about this show is a lot of the creatures in it are quite terrifying looking for us as humans, but they're completely benign and normal to the creatures of Thrall and to the Gelfling. Like the Landstriders, they're creepy. Like those are really, really, yeah. But to the Gelfling, they're like horses. Like it wouldn't surprise me if there were little Gelfling children that fantasized about owning their own Landstrider, like our little human girl children fantasize about having their own pony.
Totally. So on the other side of the fence, we have our alien beings, the Skeksis.
Yes, the Skeksis. So when you think of the Dark Crystal, you remember watching the movie, you're most likely going to remember the Skeksis. Like they are the.
It's still such a deep sense of terror.
Yeah. So the Skeksis. Now remember where we talked about the Urskeks were these alien beings that came down to Thra, but they were separated themselves into two different forms using the crystal. Well, the main form we see is the Skeksi form. They're kind of like a mix between a rat and a vulture. But they adorn themselves with opulence, which is a direct reference to their wealth and power. So we have these no offense to vultures and rats, they're wonderful creatures connected to the earth and harmonized with nature, yada yada. No creature is ugly, but the Skeksis are really ugly. But their costumes are beautiful, so just looking at them, you're conflicted. Which I think is part of their costume design. It's intentional, yeah. Oh, but yeah.
So what do you think about the character of the Emperor? How did he achieve his power and how does he maintain it?
Well, that's a good question. I'm still thinking about it, and I'm still formalizing my thoughts as to how he stays in power. Because when you watch the show, you realize all of his great ideas are given to him by the Chamberlain. Now, the Chamberlain doesn't want to be emperor, but the Chamberlain whispers in his ear and tells him all the things he needs to do. What I think the emperor has, though, is I think he's the one that he's the first one to make the decisions and make them happen. And he also wields great power via the darkening.
That's right.
Where no other Skeksis can wield it, but he can. And that's another way that he wields power over the rest of them.
So it's a social structure ruled by a dominance hierarchy.
Yeah.
He has the most power, he holds the most sway, so he holds the others in line through sort of sheer brutality and force of will.
Yeah, and he's voiced by Jason Isaacs, who is, I would say, in the shows that I've seen him in, he infamously plays villains, and very, very well. So I think he's perfect. He's a perfect voice actor for the Emperor.
So you mentioned the Chamberlain, who's another guy we've got in the character spotlight.
Yes, and can you...
Simon Pegg, who does an amazing job of capturing the original eeriness of the 1982 Chamberlain.
Yeah, his whimper. Can you please give me your best Chamberlain imitation?
No.
Please? 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 I'll try it. How was that?
I just can't even do it. It gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, the Chamberlain is he's like the Skeksis that you're probably the most familiar with if you've seen the movie. His iconic whimper is it's like a callback. You listen to it and you're like, oh, I can think of the Dark Crystal.
It's permanently etched in the recesses of your mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, Simon Pegg does an amazing job reprising him.
Yeah.
The Chamberlain's main role, he's sort of like a master of whispers in a way. He's a power-hungry Skeksis who's constantly navigating the conflicts and insecurities of his peers in order to rise to the top.
Exactly. Yes. And he's the schemer. He's the trickster. He's like a Loki character. He causes chaos.
But never for the benefit of his people.
Oh no, it's his 100% selfish, and it's all for him so that he can keep his spot beside the Emperor or rise up to it if he's lost it, which happens to him sometimes.
So let's talk about the scientist, who is definitely, I think, my favorite Skeksis, and probably yours as well.
Yes, the scientist. So he's the one that cooks up all of the contraptions that these Skeksis use to stay alive, basically. I don't want to call them youthful, because they don't look youthful. They look old and wasted, but he comes up with ways to keep them alive, and his latest contraption is forcing the crystal to drain Gelfling into into a liquid essence, which the Skeksis consume to stay alive.
That's right. This draining of the Gelfling. First of all, it takes the Gelfling out of the cycle of Thra, meaning that Gelfling can no longer participate in the reincarnation cycle that all Gelfling are privileged to and are part of the reason why I think they are closest to Thra.
When you say reincarnation, are they reincarnated, or is their life force just diverse, or what's the word, spread out into other life forces around Thra?
So I don't know the answer to that. Like, I think that you could probably read the Gelfling mythology either way. I think of it myself as they become another Gelfling again, like another Gelfling.
Oh.
Spirit. Okay. You know, sort of like the idea of like more of a Buddhist style reincarnation wheel.
Okay.
Where they don't have their memories, but it's a Gelfling soul that goes back into the Gelfling world. And that's why they're closest to Thra. Sort of how I interpret it.
Yep.
But either way, they get taken out of that reincarnation cycle, and what that does is it exacerbates the growth of the darkening further, because now the planetary balance is being expropriated.
Well, something we should say is the original idea to specifically drain Gelfling of their essence was the Chamberlain's idea. He just fed it into the scientist and let the scientist roll with that idea.
That's right.
So again, the Chamberlain is all his fault, basically.
The scientist is voiced by Mark Hamill. Yeah, famously known as Luke Skywalker in the Star Wars series, and has played many other roles since. He does a fantastic job with this character, who's noted for his single-word catchphrases, like exemplary.
Thank you for that impression.
Thank you. I'm expecting one in return.
Oh, exemplary! Was that my good scientist?
That was really good.
One more thing about the scientist is he's the only Skeksis we see give genuine compassion to another creature.
That's right. That is interesting. So we'll explore that more when we get to that scene.
Yeah, so
he's an interesting character. He's quite the black sheep amongst the Skeksis for various reasons.
Well, I wouldn't call him the black sheep. I'm saving that for another Skeksis.
Oh, okay. We'll hold on to that then.
Okay.
So yeah, this is just a quick shot showing the rest of the Skeksis sort of together here. We didn't have time to go into all of them. There's some interesting voice actors portraying the Skeksis as well, as we've seen. Really amazing, just a stellar cast. These puppets, here they are in their full armor regalia. They're absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
You can see here on the right-hand side, we've got the Hunter, who is an original Skeksis, was not part of the 1982 movie, and his counterpart, his Mystic, here. Archer. So this is the two of them and their counterpoint. So where he is violent, you can see the Mystic is sweet and kind, and in his own wrinkly ancient way, even quite pleasant to look at. And then we've also got the Heretic over here, who is another new character to the series, and his counterpart, the Wanderer.
Go the Wanderer. I had to do that.
Down here we can see the entire group here, minus the Hunter and the Heretic, gathered around the crystal to absorb.
And we're definitely going to delve even further this season into specific Skeksis and into how many there were altogether, because I believe there were 18 in total. Yeah, so we'll talk about each one and their history as what we know about them.
So I hope everybody's getting excited for the episodes ahead. So we're just getting ready to round off to a close. So we're just going to spend a couple of quick minutes here and just take a look at some of these really beautiful sceneries and some of the main sets that feature in the Dark Crystal. So this area surrounds Stone in the Wood. So major valleys, beautiful forests. We can see the mountains heading towards the Bafreux Plan here. This is the town area of Stone in the Wood. I love this set here. We can see where the Mudra's hut area is and the housing. And we've got this sort of beautiful common area with this big forge in the center of the town.
Yeah, so they call it the Crucible. And Stone in the Wood culture is, even though they're some of the best warriors of Thra, they will not kill. They do not like killing. And because life is sacred, it's sacred to the Gelflings, it's sacred to Thra. So this crucible, after a war, they take their swords that they have used in violence and they melt them in the crucible, which is why it still has swords sticking out of it that aren't quite melted yet.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Common wildlife that you see in this part of the world. Fizgigs. Can you do your best Fizgig?
Oh, you may want to lower your volume.
Don't do it. So there are a lot of sprite-like creatures, big, beautiful trees, sprawling forest,
Yeah,
as major features of the stone and the
and I love that even though some of the creatures in Thra may be inspired by Earth creatures, none of them are Earth creatures. They're all very unique and very different and specialized for life on Thra.
That's right. Yeah, the design of the puppetry and the flora and fauna of this planet are incredibly detailed.
Yeah, and
Well thought out.
the show, the show cleverly used a little bit of CGI, probably not a little bit, actually a lot of CGI. Every creature is a puppet, and most of the scenes you see are sets that were built with practical effects, but they do augment the scenes with 3D CGI just to give you an even more immersive effect that you are in a whole other world, in another place.
So here's an example of some of the mountains around the Bafreux area. And then the city of Harar itself sort of nestled in here. So we've got this incredibly realistic mountainscape with this impossible city nestled in the peaks.
Yeah, where do they can't grow any food up there, and it must be terrible in the wintertime. That's all I'm gonna say about it. Yeah.
The leader clan, they get a lot of tribute from other clans. Probably in part.
They probably import most of their food goods.
But yeah, you can see they are quite advanced. They've got lighting, they've got electricity, they've got travel, probably plumbing and running water. They're well on their way in their civilization development.
Well, something I've noticed is the lights. In a lot of the scenes, the lights are actually little glowing creatures or plants.
That's right.
So their conventions of electricity and lighting the home are not the same as Earth conventions.
That's right. So their relationship, and that's actually an important point to mention, is the relationship with energy.
Yeah.
Different.
Yeah.
So here's some of the creatures we would find in the Bafreux area, like this cute little book-eating gremlin, bane of librarians everywhere. And the Bafreux are known for breeding land striders. These massive giraffe-like, all-leg creatures with this incredible physiology. They've almost got like heads like catfish and these amazing large shoulder, like scapula blades for defense.
Yeah.
Leathery and hairy all at the same time.
Yeah, and they're also in the original movie.
That's right.
And they're actually puppeteered by a I was gonna say athlete, but you'd have to be in real good shape. they're puppeted by a person with long arm and leg stilts inside this giant creature suit.
Yes, and we have a question from 11 Spoons. Do we think they would be like horses in which a broken leg is a death sentence? Absolutely, and I think we do see some injuries like that happen in the 1982 movie.
Yeah.
Where if a leg is broken, the creature is unable to run and unable to stand, then it would be quite devastating for that creature.
Yeah.
The last setting are the Groton Caves, which take place underground. So these caves are also, like the rest of the planet, full of life. So the Groton farm cave moss and also these specialized breed of worms with all these neat like eye arms.
Eye arms, yeah. I don't know their physiology whatsoever. I don't know what's going on. An eye. I don't know, but I'd like to say they're almost inspired by an eyeless fish or like an eyeless amphibian.
Yes. Something like that, yeah. These are a gentle... This worm is actually a really interesting featured creature in the series because it is a very gentle, loving... They're almost like cave cows.
Yeah.
But when the darkening reaches them and corrupts them, because the darkening starts in the bowels of the planet and then slowly works its way up. So these creatures are some of the first to show symptoms of infection by the darkening, and the darkening includes, so these beautiful blue eyes will turn vividly purple, and these creatures will become violent and aggressive and intent on destruction, both of everything around them and themselves.
Yeah, and in just this this particular scene here, they remind me of sandworms from Dune.
Yeah,
a little bit.
totally.
And I feel like I just thought of something. Deet says that her clothing is made from the hide of an animal, which means they're consuming animals in Grot. They're not vegan.
Well, they might not be consuming animals, they might just be making use of them. But yeah, we can totally hypothesize on that. One of the key things about the Caves of the Groton is that they are connected to the overworld through this amazing tree called the Sanctuary Tree.
Who
Also really, really ancient. What's the name of the spider species again?
Artham.
Artham, thank you. I confuse them with the Gartham all the time, but that's a different story. The Artham lived here before the Grot ever did, and the mythology here is that the Artham refused to be subservient to the Skeksis, so the Skeksis enslaved them and then gave the lands to a more docile species, which is the gentle Grot.
Yes. Yeah, so the Sanctuary Tree is like a character all in itself. It's voiced, acted.
That's right, and it has a deep connection to the health of the planet and is affected by the health of the planet, but is able to communicate that to certain beings, including Deet.
Yeah.
Part of our Gelfling triad.
Yeah, and
of the Sanctuary Tree close up.
The Sanctuary Tree is also like a world tree, which is in a lot of Earth mythologies, where there's a single tree that is encompasses the universe in it.
Totally.
Yeah.
So we'll be diving a lot more into the role of the Sanctuary Tree.
Yeah. Can bestow powers.
The last major set piece here, and I'm just going to go through these quickly because we're over time, is the Crystal Desert. The Crystal Desert is, I think, one of the most visually stunning sets in the series. With all of this amazing red rock, it's where our death-worshipping clan of Gelfling reside, the Deucin, and it is where our Gelfling trio travels in order to learn the truth about the Skeksis. So you can see here, here's an example of the Golem, Nort.
Lord. His name's Lord, Lore, L-O-R-E.
Not Nor, it's Lore?
Lore, yeah.
Oh man, this whole time. And he's there with Brea. And then we can see why the Crystal Desert gets its name. So here's an example. These beautiful flying rays are a major feature of the desert. These flying, what we would consider to be sea creatures, but they seem perfectly at home in the air here over this beautiful crystal desert, right? So we can see these large crystal formations.
Yeah, which are probably created by the lightning from the sandstorms that they get.
Like this one, right?
Yeah, you can see the lightning's creating these huge crystal structures out of the sand because lightning is high heat, and sometimes when it hits sand on Earth, it will form glass.
That's right. And so this structure here is going to be really, really important. We'll be going into this one in future episodes.
It kind of looks like the Skeksy Castle, don't you think?
A little bit, except not death-like.
More,
like it's just got smooth walls. There's no like bones really growing out of it. It seems a lot more organic in some ways, simpler, perhaps.
More rocky. Sorry.
Here's a great example of a life form that has, as you said, evolved in harmony with Thra. It's a type of, I think, amphibian or reptile.
It looks like a crystal Stegosaurus, and I love it. And it's also always like laying down, like lazy. And I'm like, that's such a
It me fan.
It me. So we have a comment from 11 Spoons. They say, every time I see Lore, I get reminded of Galaxy Quest.
Oh, that's nice.
I've seen Galaxy Quest, but I don't remember a rock golem being in it, but Lore is like a rock golem.
That's right. And here is, sorry, because I've got this, I don't have a photo of Lore up, I'm just going to segue back to our Crystal Desert Ray here. A close-up of one of the flying rays in Crystal Desert.
Yeah, they're interesting. They're like a mix between a manta ray and an elephant. And I don't know how they fly, but an elephant.
An elephant.
Well, it's got these trunks that blow air. I don't know. And it sounds like an elephant.
Maybe they create their own thermals or something.
We could speculate about the biological physics going on here for a long time.
We would never get outside.
Oh, by the way, another thing I really want to mention, it's important. Thra, not only does Thra have 3 suns, Thra has 3 moons that hang in close proximity in the sky together.
Beautiful. Yeah, and you can see two of those. Actually, you can see all three of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, the number 3 is a recurring feature here. So that's everything that I had for the slides here. And the rest of our podcast. Now, before we go, did you have any other questions or thoughts you wanted to bring up?
I have a question for you that's really silly, but it is. So, but you know what? I think it involves the Skeksis, and I think we need to wait until later after we've talked about all of them in depth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now what you've done is you basically teased everybody who's watching.
Yeah.
Who do you think grows the most in the series?
Oh, character growth. Rian? I'm gonna say Rian. He goes from running away a lot to totally facing his fears and facing the authority.
Yeah, I would totally back you on that. I also think Celadon is a good contender.
Yeah, Celadon definitely does a 180.
We haven't talked about Celadon in this podcast, really. Celadon is Brea's sister.
Yeah.
She is coming from a place of deep, deep denial and has some really rough wake-up calls.
Yeah, but I have so much to say about Celadon and her life choices.
Oh yeah, totally.
And we're gonna save that for future episodes when she's prominently featured in probably episode 1 or 2, I think, or maybe episode 8. I don't know. We haven't written out our timelines yet.
I have to watch all of them in order to find out.
Yeah. Another thing, the whole catalyst for this story that we touched on briefly, but we need to maybe talk about a bit more, is the Skeksis have been draining the crystal itself for years. But then they started draining Gelfling of their essence. Basically, the Skeksis have been consuming goods and services in the very life force of Thra. However, now, in season 1, they start killing a Gelfling and consuming their essence. They're literally starting to consume the people that are that they're lording over.
That's right. So it stops being about the expropriation of natural resources like the energy of Thra.
Yeah.
To a point that the planet can no longer supply the level of energy that they need to survive, so they need to continue to ramp up their means of production, ramp up their extraction of energy and life from the planet by now directly killing life on the planet. It's an amazingly brutal and sad metaphor for late-stage capitalism.
Yeah, and the Gelfling themselves, they're called the closest to Thra. It's possible that in the Gelfling they have the brightest and the most powerful life force. And that's why they're the best ones right now for the Skeksis to drain. But we see in the movie they're down to draining podlings and anything that they can get their hands on for their life force. The podlings probably don't give them as much, whereas the Gelfling were giving a lot of essence, the podlings and other creatures. And then there's a blight upon the land because the Skeksis are probably they're collecting every animal, every creature that they can to drain so that they can stay living longer, which is really it's a comment on how capitalistic society is constantly digging up resources in an unsustainable way to keep the capitalistic wheel moving forward and ever growing.
That's right. Yeah, so this is an example, actually. This is a great example of how we're going to be deconstructing some of these key themes and story ideas in the Dark Crystal to talk about some of the larger messages that this show has for audiences today who are watching and learning from the show.
Yeah.
So I think this is probably a good place to end it. We're a little bit over time, but we covered everything that we wanted to today, and that's really exciting. I hope that everybody has got a good idea of what our podcast is going to be about and are going to be sticking with us moving forward into future episodes so you can learn more about these powerful symbols and these powerful stories.
I am really excited to go in depth, episode per episode. I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of strong feelings about the Dark Crystal. It's one of my favorite shows that has come out in the last 30 years.
It's why we're doing AmandaToast, right? And
yeah,
that's a good point. it's time for us to wrap up our show, and because we are AmandaToast and we're here to celebrate the things we love in fantasy and sci-fi, we're going to wrap up each one of our episodes with a toast. So what should we toast to today?
Oh, well, we got a toast to 10 fresh hours with fresh content and puppetry and this beautiful story that Netflix has given us.
That's right. Yeah, instead of 112 minutes or whatever the original film length was, we've got 10 full hours building in the Thra. So that is definitely something worth celebrating.
Yeah, let's toast to Jim Henson Company and Netflix. Thank you, guys. This is
I
wonderful.
wouldn't go that far.
Well, they made it.
That's true.
They made it.
Okay, everybody, we are Amanda and Amanda, two best friends with a lot of things to say, and 93 minutes is the original.
Even shorter. A tease. A bare tease.
A tease. Goodbye, everybody,
Okay.
and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Okay, I stopped streaming. Have you stopped recording?
I have to pee. I'll be right back.